Hey guys, how y'all doing? Just out here with my little guy again, right? Have a nice little walk here in the graveyard. Isn't it right, buddy? Come on, let's go. Milo, let's go, come on. Oh man, I don't even know what day we're on anymore of this isolation. It's hard to keep track of the time, I gotta be honest. I'm getting very tired of being in my own apartment and then coming out here, going for one walk with my little guy, and then back to my apartment. Kind of craving going anywhere else. Literally anywhere else would be good at this stage in the game. But lots of people still on that kind of essential worker. Lots of restaurants and things trying to do their best, offering takeout only service, these sorts of things. One of the big things I think that we're all learning from this is how most of what we have been doing is non-essential work. That most of us have just sort of been involved in the process of kind of shuffling goods around for fun, for each other's entertainment. And while that's all well and good, like I work in a toy store, for goodness sakes. Like I think that giving toys to children is probably a good thing. But I also think it's a good thing to take a little bit more time and to slow things down and to replace these goods with time. To take the time that we are spending distributing those goods to one another to instead slow down and enjoy the time that we have with one another. I think people work too hard. I think we spend too much time trying to facilitate this society, this system, and a pandemic like this really shows you how much of that time is being spent simply trying to pay your bills, simply trying to facilitate the demands of the capitalist death cult. And now things have slowed down, things are going to continue slowing down, and my hope is that people will come out of this realizing that a lot of what we're doing is not necessary, and that we do need to slow down, and that we do need to take more time to foster those sort of forgotten arts. There was always this talk of self-care, but I genuinely don't think anybody knows how to do that. I think that people use goods and use food and use alcohol and use drugs as methods to facilitate what they think is self-care. And I'm not trying to claim that I know how to do that either, that I understand what self-care is or how to achieve it. But I do know that the attempt to achieve it requires a great deal more time than we are allotted. The scant hours in the evening, well, if you're lucky, it's consistently the evening, the scant hours, and then the few days off in a week so that we can run around and do some errands and kind of get our life set up so that we can tolerate this sort of manic schedule that we've been required to keep in order to pay these bills that accrue. It's impossible. It's impossible to take a moment and slow down and really exist peacefully just with the people around you. It's completely off the table. And what's disappointing, the more and more research I do and the more and more I see, it's really, really obvious that the liberals are going to be more than happy to hand the society back over to the capitalist death cult. What they've done in terms of the help that they're handing out, it's revealing major cracks. I just read an article just yesterday where talking about the people who are not covered in the liberal kind of care package, because while they understand that they do need to extend aid, they do need to do something to ameliorate the help that people are getting, there is a complete political cowardice amongst the liberals to actually do what's necessary to salvage the society from the capitalist death cult. And what's necessary, certainly at the very least, as a temporary measure, what's necessary is a basic income. Because it's really plain that this non-essential work that we're all racing around and doing, and this non-essential work that we're all manically sacrificing our lives to achieve, is doing massive damage to our environment and to the society around us, which is and there's going to be a reckoning for that. And that reckoning is going to happen sooner than we all like. And we know that the fact that we've all had to slow down and stop because of the coronavirus has actually helped the environment. It's actually helping very quickly. It's already having an effect on the way that the environment is reacting and the way the environment is going. It's already helping. And we don't want to admit it. We don't want to admit it because how it's going to be pitched to us once we get the all clear and once we can head back out onto the street, we're going to be told, let's try to get things back to normal. That's what the liberals are going to say. Let's try to get some semblance of normalcy. Let's try to get things back to normal. Because if you're a liberal, right, you're essentially an honorary member of the capitalist death cult, right? You're at least an apologist. Because you don't want to admit that normal is a horror movie for millions of people. That normal means complete social abandonment. It means that our lives are strictly transactional. That the only conversations you ever have with anyone is explicitly based around these financial contracts. That there is no there is no friendship or connection that rests outside of that transactional arrangement. That humans are a commodity. And of course, if you're a buyer and seller of humans, you want things to go back to normal, right? The slavers did not want to abolish slavery. And it is true with the capitalist death cultists. They're not going to want to give up capitalism. They're not going to want to give up the purchasing and the selling of human time. They're not going to give up any of that. They're going to want to try to return things back to normal, which means throwing people back out on the streets to live homelessness, which means throwing people back into situations where they're not sure if they're going to be able to pay their bills, which means throwing people back into these situations of desperation, and then smiling and telling everybody how great a job you're doing. I think that's evil, and it's exactly what's going to happen. And I do, once again, think that we have to give credit to the liberals for making, especially when you see what's going down in the States, the absolute cluster that that the United States is during all of this. But that shouldn't be our standard. Our standard should be a rigorous and continual improvement of our society. And telling people that they need to spend the bulk of their time in non-essential jobs to appease people who will abandon them the second they're not profitable is not a good, normal society. That's a sick, unhealthy society in the first place. And so we need to be honest with that, and we need to look at that, and we need to really ask ourselves, do we want to continue propping up this system that is designed first and foremost to destroy and abandon us? I don't think we should. I think that there are lots of things that we could do that would ameliorate this situation. I think there are lots of things that we can focus on. I see articles from time to time, they say, this virus will change us, that this situation will change us. I hope so, but I don't know how that change is going to look. I don't know if that change is going to be positive or a negative. It's all well and good to say that this will change us. But then, of course, you read these articles and they're all about how, oh, we'll be more conscious of our neighbor, and they're correct. I mean, the ideology of individualism can't survive in this kind of environment. That kind of the ideology of the death cult. This idea that an individual can stand against the full force of all of nature and the full force of all of humanity and be successful. It's untenable and it has to die. And so these articles are correct when they come out and they say we'll be more caring or more understanding or more respectful of our neighbor. One hopes, but that has nothing to do, and that doesn't address the actual economic structure of our system, which is exploitive, which says first and foremost that one person should own another person. It's not the direct ownership of slavery, but it's wage slavery. And I have a book at home called Cotton is King. It's one of these books that I feel should be required reading. I don't understand why we're reading Tess of the dUrbervilles, this meaningless drivel, when there's an actual series of essays written by the proponents of pro-slavery during the period of the Civil War in America. And once you read this, you really do come to understand that those same arguments are being used. Those same pro-slavery arguments are being used by the pro-capitalist death cultists now. That they haven't changed their perception, they haven't changed their narrative. All that's changed is that instead of them directly owning you, right, they rent you. And that's considered normal and rational behavior. And so once again, Cotton is King. I think it should be required reading. There are sections, of course, that are quite dry because it's all just economics about how much money slaves make white people, because that's good. And that hill. Every time with that hill. And so I think as we come out of this, right now we're just settling into it. It's just becoming kind of a normal thing that people are going to be at home, that there needs to be support. all of this kind of thing. What's really obvious to me during this period of time is that nobody understands how an economy works. I keep having the same conversation online, of course, but I keep having the same conversation over and over and over and over and over and over again. That if you pass the basic income, oh, well, where are you going to get? You need to do that every year. It's going to cost that much money every year. Like, yeah. Yeah, it's going to cost that much every single year because spent money doesn't disappear into a black hole, right? Economies operate in cycles. Money circulates. Every time you spend money, it's taxed. That tax money returns to the government and then is redistributed back into the populace to be circulated and retaxed and then collected again and then recirculated. That's how an economy works. And there's this kind of odd idea, and it's 100% just a neoliberal capitalist propaganda idea that really takes advantage of the fact that no one understands how an economy works in the most basic sense. But the idea is that if you give money to the poor, it is wasted money. I can't imagine a stupider thing to say. And this is exactly where we're going. You know, we're getting into a period of time now where all of the neoliberal propaganda, we don't really need to be debating it anymore. It's obviously stupid. Like, if you're a person who's actually attempting to tell me that it's up to the individual to make individual choices, then you're stupid. And there's just no other way to say it anymore. That you can say a person should work hard. You can say whatever you would like. But if you're trying to tell me that as an economic system, as the system that controls kind of our day-to-day kind of situations, you're trying to tell me that it's up to the individual, then I think you're stupid. And I don't think that a person needs to back off on that anymore. I can't imagine, imagine somebody standing up in the middle of a pandemic and saying it's up to individuals to operate for themselves. You don't need to imagine it. You can see Ben Shapiro doing it because he's fundamentally stupid, right? He's not well read. He's not well thought. He doesn't actually understand what's going on around him. He's just a rich billionaire or a rich millionaire kid who has never had to work a day in his life, and he's just stupid. And every time he debates anybody who actually knows what they're talking about or is well read, he looks stupid because he's stupid. And it's time to stop listening to stupid people. It's time to stop believing stupid things. And if you're genuinely going to tell me that the individual has to deal with these large social issues by themselves and has no recourse but to try to fight independently, then not only do I think you're stupid, I think you're actually rapaciously evil. This ideology of abandonment that says we should abandon people to the pandemic. This is why it's called a capitalist death cult. That's why capitalism is a death cult, because of its desire to abandon people during periods of crisis. Like, what do you think is going to happen when climate change comes around? What do you think is going to happen when there's actually food shortages? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think these billionaires are going to really work hard to try to make sure everybody's taken care of? They're going to abandon you. They're going to abandon you the second they can. The second it's no longer profitable for them to stick around, they'll leave. And you can see that happening during this pandemic. You can just witness it. There have been studies done. I say this over and over again. There have been studies done on the mental health of the wealthy. And there is a threshold of wealth that once you attain it, you become less empathetic. And the more wealth you accrue, the less empathetic you are. Which means, I hate to break it to you rich people, you're probably a sociopath. You gotta face up to this. This is a crucial and major issue. Somebody asks me, well, what's the problem with inequality? Aren't you just jealous of somebody else's wealth? It's like, no. I think that we should be very skeptical of inequality, because the more wealthy a person gets and the more detached they get from the lived reality of everyone else in their society, the more and more they act like a sociopath. That's very dangerous, especially as they're the person that has the power in the society. They can buy labor, they can accrue this sort of stuff. So we need to be deeply skeptical of them, and we need to be deeply skeptical of a political class that is going to hand power back to them once this crisis is over. This is the thing that we need to bang on more than anything. They're going to hand the society back over to the capitalist death cult instead of making social services and making social policy more robust. Instead of saying to the society, hey, we're going to take care of you, we're going to allow you to live a free life, we're going to ensure that the only work that gets done is essential work, unless you voluntarily choose to open your own business. We won't stand in the way of that, of course. But this idea that a person who is just trying to get by and is just trying to figure out their own place in the world and in their society needs to also answer to these rapacious billionaires who will abandon them at any moment. This needs to be done away with. It needs to be done away with. It needs to die off. The billionaire class needs to go. I actually argue that the millionaire class needs to go. I don't see any reason for any of this to exist. We see the disaster. This has been a trial run disaster for us. We see what happens, which is the wholesale abandonment of the working class. We don't need to return to it. We shouldn't return to it. And if politicians do return us to it, if they do hand the society back over to the capitalist death cult, we should get them out of office. They should lose their support completely. And there should be no place in our political system for people who are willing to abandon the society to a capitalist death cult. All right, with that, I'm off. I hope you guys are all doing well. Try to have fun. Give your friends and your family a hug. Love you all.